All right. So really, it's this video is going to be about something that I think is not talked about often enough. Oftentimes on YouTube, you hear many people talk about all the money you can make as a content creator. Do YouTube, you can make money. Do YouTube, you can make money. But I don't feel what enough people share, even creators who have made like millions, thousands, just a lot of money, they don't really share what do they do with their money. All that's tend to be showed is this particular lifestyle of like a content creator, like this content creator lifestyle, this YouTuber lifestyle. And oftentimes it's quite lavish, filled with a lot of luxuries, nice homes, nice cars, trips, bags, shoes, clothes. Essentially, especially if you watch people in the lifestyle vlogging niche, because their main content is showing their life, you see them constantly spending money, constantly doing things that require a large amount of money, but you don't necessarily know what happens behind the scenes. How do they manage their money? What are some of maybe the cons or the pitfalls they experienced when they first started getting money as a content creator? These are things that you don't hear about. And um, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about things like lifestyle creep and spending on appearances, chasing illusions, and how you can really find yourself in an unfortunate situation if you're neglectful of your financial health once you do become a successful content creator. During this live stream, or if you're watching on the replay, please feel free to ask any financial related questions, and we will be doing a Q&A mostly at the end. Um, but maybe you never know. One of your questions might get answered before we get to the end of the video. Um, you may be wondering, like, what qualifications, Nala, do you have to be talking about finances and financial health? Well, I don't have much, but I have my own experience as a content creator, and I have a surprise for you. My financial advisor is going to be joining us on this call. His name is Gamal Walker. He is a financial services veteran, change management consultant, and executive coach who works with a wide range of clients, including content creators, helping them navigate their businesses and their finances. So please give a warm welcome to Gamal. Hello. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Technical difficulty.
Hello.
Yes. Hello. We can hear you.
Good. Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. Yes. So let's not waste any time. We did kind of have this conversation a little bit offline, but I know one of the things that was brought up is this lifestyle creep trap. And that's mainly what, if you take a look at the title of this video, that's the this. Many content creators fall into a lifestyle creep trap, and I wanted you to shine some light about on that and talk about that for us, please.
All right. So I think, what I liken it to is maybe you need to crawl before you can walk, right? You need to walk before you can run. And I think that, while what content creators tend to do, it's pretty miraculous, right? This isn't an area or an occupation or a business model that existed 20 or 30 years ago, right? So it's a relatively new thing. So, kudos to all of those who have the time and the talent to go out there and do these wonderful things, right? This is a new medium and a new way that you can communicate through content creation. But having said that, I think that, some of the same old things that maybe people used to get caught up in years ago, it's still prevalent now. And I think that sometimes people feel like they need to project a certain lifestyle or a certain image when it isn't reality. It's not realistic. And so if I'm looking at you, like if I watch music videos back in the days, I see artists that I liked. Everybody had a nice car. Everybody had jewelry. Everybody had money and all these other things. But nine times out of 10, they didn't own any of those things. Those were props, right? And so what I'm saying is, the content creators tend to have a lot of props, and it winds up being something that may be a bit unrealistic. Some of these things are aspirational for sure, but often it's not a true reality with respect to whatever it is that you're trying to do. And I think that sometimes it's important to take a step back and understand that, as so you don't get frustrated. You don't get overly frustrated feeling that you should be somewhere when others are just sort of, you know, pretending.
Yeah, and I think from my experience, a large part of the appeal or allure to become a content creator had similar ideals with entrepreneurship and what is kind of sold with entrepreneurship, that freedom. If you're a content creator, you have freedom over your time, you have freedom over your money. These are things that they say to us. And I think that freedom is great. But even in my own experience, when you have been waiting so long to make money from content creation, once you finally do, it can be hard to make the right decision with your money. And I want to take a moment to talk about like a little bit more of spending on appearances. So a lot of people, a lot of content creators, instead of focusing on financial stability and long-term wealth, they end up splurging on items and experiences that project an image of success but don't contribute to true financial security. So what would you say is true financial security for content creators, or something that we should be focusing on outside of the appearances, the trips, the bags, the shoes, kind of what I talked about in the beginning of this video?
Well, you mentioned earlier, you talked about freedom, right? And you talked about entrepreneurship hopefully being a pathway to freedom. I'm assuming that you mean freedom from a 9 to 5 job, freedom from a boss, or whatever the case may be. But make no mistake about it. If you choose the path of being an entrepreneur, whatever area you wind up um, pursuing, you all still answer to somebody. Everybody answers to somebody. And if it's not your boss, it's your client base, it's your subscribers, it's, everyone's beholden to somebody. So let's not make that mistake, because without them, right, without your audience, your content means nothing. It's great, but if without somebody to consume it, and without somebody, more people to come in and build you up and do all those other things and help you expand, it doesn't mean anything. So I think that one of the things is, regardless of the type of business that you're in, but you as a content creator, you have to think about this as it's a true business, right? It sounds great. Oh, I'm an entrepreneur. What does that really mean? There's a lot that goes into being an entrepreneur. There's a lot of sacrifices, right? Some would say that it's a lot more difficult than working that 9 to 5. What I don't think that your audience sees is the huge investment in hardware that you've made, right? In terms of being able to put on a certain quality level of production. They don't know what you spent. You know what you spent. And so when you think about making money, for some people, you're not making money yet initially. When those dollars start to roll in, what you're trying to do is backfill some of that hole that you're in, because you had to make an
Mm,
investment in what it is that you're trying to do. And so you have to think about it that way. I am making an investment in my business, which means I have to have the proper hardware, I have to have the proper lighting, I have to have the proper bandwidth in order to be able to do these different things. And so I would encourage anybody who's going down this route to not think of it as just, I'm going to hop on here and start talking to people and people are going to like it. I would, everything that you do winds up ultimately being an investment in trying to put out a top quality product, right? Wouldn't you say that? Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think there's a couple of things I want to bring up after you have said this. A lot of people struggle to even begin content creation because of the fact they think they need the best equipment or this kind of quality equipment just to get started. But even the advice of, oh, just start with your phone. This phone isn't cheap. Even if you're paying for it over a course of 24 months on your phone bill, you're still paying for $1,000 plus product oftentimes just to record your content. And some people, depending on their situations, they can make a larger investment up front when they're first getting started with their channel. Some people can't. But even depending on where you are within that, it's like what I'm learning from what you said, or really just having it soak in, even once I start making money, it's going right back into my YouTube channel and my business, whether to, like you said, backfill all what has been spent already to produce the content of this level, or maybe there's some improvements that I can make. Because speaking up to that person who's just started with their phone or got a $10 mic on Amazon, you want to improve over time. You don't just want to stay with where you started. But I think it is also hard to figure out, okay, when do you make that investment? If what I'm doing is working, when do you make that investment? Because that's another thing. People get caught up in buying into growing their content and sometimes make maybe not the best financial decisions there. Do you have anything to say about that? People get into credit card debt for investing in their content creation careers. How does someone figure out when to make these particular investment jumps?
Again, as a responsible business owner or someone who is even considering making the move to do this, you have to sometimes, unfortunately, out of necessity, you may have to straddle both worlds, right? You may have to make a decision that I'm going to work that 9 to 5 or part-time job or whatever it is because I need a certain amount of money coming in because I need to take this cash and invest it in what I ultimately want to do, right? Taking a credit card without a plan, going out and buying, tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment is not necessarily going to put you on a pathway to success. You have to sit in like any other, it has to be treated like any other business. And other businesses, oftentimes, when you're thinking about getting a loan, borrowing money from somebody, whether it's a bank, whether it's an individual loan, you know, you have to come up with a plan. You have to come up with a business plan, right? And it's not just around your content, it's around what it's going to cost you to be able to produce that content. How much money is it going to cost me? Does it make sense to delay moving into this so I can save that cash and not be put myself in a situation where I've maxed out everything I own and now I am a lot less likely to stick with it if I'm not, if I'm not gaining traction earlier on.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you really have to think about. When you are living check to check, when you don't know where your next dollar is coming from, it becomes more and more difficult to stick with something. As opposed to, I thought about it, this is something that I wanted to do. I'm willing to work for another 6 months, 12 months, 18 months in order to save that cash to make the investment, but then also to have some kind of a cushion. Um, Generically speaking, if you're talking to anybody, you often talk about having a certain amount of money saved up for a rainy day, right? This is something probably that we've all heard about. So when you're thinking about taking that leap into entrepreneurship, you want to make sure you have a certain amount of money in reserves for you to cover your living expenses and to make your investment. And if you don't, you put your potential business in jeopardy from the very beginning. So something that folks have to think about. It is, I want to do this, I want to do it now, I don't want to wait, but you have to weigh some of these things out, like the pros and cons of going right now and maxing everything out, or delaying that, saving the money, and then being able to have a little bit of a runway with which to launch your business.
Yeah, I think that is solid advice. Let's take a brief break and answer some of the questions that have come through the chat. Derek asks, what's the first steps I should take when looking to invest my money?
Well, most of most of the questions that may be asked about investing, I'm going to start with it depends. It all depends on your situation. But I would say, generically speaking, you need to make sure that you actually have funds to invest, right? Some people don't have money to invest. You need to make sure that you have certain bare bones minimum covered. So let's assume that you have those bases covered, right? You're not living check to check. You have some cash. You just never have been in a situation where you felt like, okay, I'm going to put some of this money to work. Well, again, you want to sit down with a plan. You need to, if it's not something that you can do on your own, find a professional or find someone who has some experience. Sit down and then really figure out what your situation is. What is your appetite for risk, right? What is your knowledge about some of these things that you might want to invest in, right? Do you know anything about stocks or bonds or crypto or any of these other things? And is it important enough to you to start to educate yourself? So what I would say is step one is educate yourself. I've been doing this for over 20 years and I still learn things on a daily basis, right? Just like your doctor or your lawyer or your dentist, those people have to continually educate themselves to get better and better. And what I would say is you want to do the same. And if you can do some self study, but I would say also talk to some professionals who can help you out with some of these things. But you need to be somewhat aware of what it is that you're doing, so you can feel comfortable about some of the investments that you make. Often you see people jump into something because they have money burning a hole in their pocket. They wanted to do it. And then when they do it without any requisite knowledge. And then they feel burned and then they never go back again. I would say that investing is can be for everybody, right? It can work out well for everybody, but I think if it's not something that you grew up having conversations at the dinner table with your parents, if it's not something that is generational within your line and you may be the first one to start it, educate yourself on it. So that may or may not
Um,
be, the answer that you were looking for, but it's a long process. And there's no quick fix. There's no quick thing that someone can tell you, and then you can go out and do it, and then you're gonna, strike it rich. I would be very, very leery of anybody who says do one, two, or three different things, and you're good to go. You have to find a multitude of resources, talk to a lot of different people, and really start to educate yourself.
I think that was a solid answer in terms of first steps. For me and myself, my husband is a big investor, but I was nervous and used to putting my money elsewhere. So I know I started small with my investing, so that was just my little 2 cents I wanted to throw in there. We have another question, but we'll get to that question in a second. I just want to talk about this conversation of like, why is it that whether you're in the entertainment industry or you're doing YouTube or whatever the case may be, this is a probably considered a less traditional job, being a content creator. And when me and Gamal were talking offline about this, the parallel to like NBA players and young players, it's like you never know when your channel is going to pop off. You never know when that's going to happen for you. You could get monetized next week and start getting in loads of money. Brands can be knocking down your door, wanting to work with you, and you just never know when this influx of cash from your content creation may happen, and it could creep up on you, which could lead to that lifestyle creep. So I do want to talk about, like, oftentimes you may have a skill set of content creation, you may have the skill set of being an amazing basketball player or an amazing entertainer, but that doesn't mean you have great financial literacy. So what are your thoughts regarding that?
I would say, just as I said, invest in your business. You have to invest in yourself. Similar, somewhat similar to what I kind of the answer I gave Derek in terms of just being educated. As you mentioned, I could be,
Mm,
Picasso, right? I could be a great singer, I could be a great dancer, whatever it is. Very often, what I will say is, in my experience in working with different client types, I found that, the creative types that I've had the pleasure to work with, really poured a lot of their heart and soul into whatever it is that they were creating, right? And I would, maybe it's not an apples to apples comparison, but I would kind of liken what it is that you're doing, the content creation piece, to artistry of some sort, artistry, entertainment, or whatever it might be. And I find that those people are so super passionate about what it is that they're doing. They often, they operate with blinders on, and they don't necessarily have time for the business aspects of what it is that they're doing,
yeah,
right? I'm just I'm an artist, I'm an entertainer, that's what I do. Well, it can't really stop there, right? Because you are a business, right? You're an industry in and of yourself. And I would encourage more people to kind of think about it and operate that way. If it's not something that you're comfortable with and that you like, then you're going to have to work with somebody or find somebody, until you can get comfortable with it, or to help you get comfortable with it. Because what you don't want to do is sell yourself short. You don't want to, listen, all money's not good money. But if you,
yeah,
as a content creator, have a plan, you know what your value is and you know what your worth is, you're able to kind of confidently negotiate some of these situations that are coming towards you. And sometimes you're going to say no, and you'll say it confidently, right? Because you'll know that that wasn't the right situation, that properly values my time and my energy and my talent. I need to go on to the next situation. So, I would say, consider yourself a business and operate accordingly. It's great that you pour a lot into your content creation, but it's equally as important when you make the money to be able to keep money. And some people are great earners, but they're not so great at actually retaining that money once they get it in house. And so the infrastructure needs to be set up. You need to have obviously, generically speaking, you're going to want to have you want certain accounts. You want to have an infrastructure there in
mm,
place, whether it be for investing, whether it be for regular household things, whether it be for putting money away for longer term aspirations, whether that's a home or an investment property or a car, whatever it is for you that might be a longer term thing. Have to start thinking about those things in advance, and then put them in. Some I hear people say a lot, well, what do I need to do all this for? I'm not making any money yet, right? Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have
Let's
it
talk
yet.
about that.
Yeah, so I'll wait until I have it in order to do it. And that's being reactionary. And that sometimes puts you in a very poor situation, as opposed to being proactive and setting things up and being well prepared for when your hard work begins to pay off, right? That's Waiting can put you in a situation where you can be taken advantage of, right?
Yes, and there's been many examples within entertainment or sports industry where younger, or it doesn't necessarily even matter the age, but those people get taken advantage of and find themselves in unfavorable financial situations because, like you said, they were being reactionary. I think the question from Digital Art with Canva asking, can you explain taxes and what to put away for self-employment taxes? Before you answer it, I do think this speaks to what you just kind of mentioned of having an infrastructure in place for your YouTube business or your content creation business. A part of every business is taxes. And we definitely can have Gamal back in the future to have a deeper, more in-depth conversation about taxes for content creators and things like that. But if you can just kind of touch the surface of taxes for those that are self-employed, because when you're doing YouTube, you can explain that. Because when I just was gonna say though, like when you're doing YouTube, it's not like YouTube pays you directly in terms of like you work for the company of YouTube. You're technically considered like a contractor almost, and that's how it will work with your taxes.
Well, so I mean, it sounds like it sounds like you want to answer that. Did your Lord with Kev question? You got off to a good start, and again, what I will, you'll hear me say this several times, maybe throughout this conversation. You know, I'll give you, I'll qualify my answers with this. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a tax person. What I am is I'm a registered investment advisor, right? And so with that, I have to be somewhat knowledgeable in some basics around taxes. But generically speaking, what a person may want to do when they are making income as a 1099 contractor, right? If you have an entity set up, you can have whatever funds you're making go to your entity and then to yourself, or if it's coming directly to you. But let's just say we're talking about a contractor who is not an employee of a particular company.
And when
It's
you say entity, you're talking about an LLC or?
Yes, something up
Okay.
to that effect. What I
Yes.
would say is where folks who make income that doesn't have the taxes already taken out can sometimes get themselves into trouble is they wait all the way until they wait an entire year until tax time, and then they have to actually come up with, they have to pay taxes on the income that they've earned over a period of time. It is not the worst thing in the world to prepay your taxes on a quarterly basis, right? You can come up with a rule of thumb, you know, whether it's, you have to take a look at everyone's situation winds up being different and unique. And so each individual would have to take a look at their own unique situation and come up with a range of, you know, 25 to 33% or something like that that you want to take from the income that you're bringing in and just go ahead and prepay it to the IRS. If you overpay, you get it back, right? And if you, even if you've underpaid, you aren't then staring down the barrel of a massive tax payment, you know, potentially on a state and federal level, because you've just kind of taken that $100 that you made isn't really that $100 isn't really all yours. Some of that belongs to Uncle Sam. So you may owe the you may owe the IRS and or the state $33 of the $100 that you brought in, but you spent it because it's already in your pocket. It wasn't taken out for you like an employer might do. So you have to start thinking about that for yourself. So it may not be the worst thing in the world to set up a situation where you can prepay taxes on a quarterly basis, so that when you get to the time of year where you do your taxes, you're not in a tough situation where you need to come up with lump sums of money.
Yeah. We have a question from Allie. For every check I receive, what percentage should I put towards investing? And I do want this question to be answered in conjunction with something I wanted to have you answer as well. Like, what should you do with your first $1,000 that you make from content creation? I think that has to do with like a check you receive from YouTube. And $1,000 isn't that much money, but I do want to take in consideration a lot of us content creators, we have to do so much work for a long time without getting paid anything. And having like a nice and neat number like $1,000 or maybe the first $3,000, how can you give us some examples of, yes, what percentage of that should go towards investing or towards these different things that would put us in a position to have good financial health as a content creator?
So remember what I said earlier in the conversation. My answers will begin with it depends, right? It depends on each person's situation. It depends on if are you contributing to some sort of a 401k or similar retirement account already through an employer, or even if you're self-employed, are you contributing already? And if you're not, should you be? And so, there was a rule of thumb that people would say, you got to pay yourself first, which I certainly believe. But, it was pay yourself 10%, right, of whatever that check is. In this particular example, pay yourself 10% gross. Try to pay yourself 10% gross, meaning either put that money away, so it is earmarked for something, or be able to have a vehicle through which you want to invest. But again, remember I said earlier, you need to set up an infrastructure in order to do these things, right? It's much easier for you to go and set up an account somewhere. You can use your phone, you can use obviously your laptop, so it's much easier to access capital markets now versus even 10 or 20 years ago. But you have to have the infrastructure set up. It has to be an infrastructure that you're comfortable with, that you've done some research on, and then think about, how do I want to invest this money? Sometimes you don't have to pull the trigger. Sometimes you just want to start building up the cash to be able to lay it out in an investment. So you always want to, I would, it's not the worst thing in the world to think about paying yourself first. And if you could get to a point where you're holding about 10% gross of the money that you're bringing in, that you would like to earmark for some sort of investment above and beyond, taking care of all your other bills and responsibilities. That's probably a decent place to start. Obviously, I don't know that person's individual situation. Maybe it's not 10% if they're already maxing out a 401k, right? Maybe that's a completely different conversation.
Yeah, to the original question of what percentage to put towards investing, would you say 10%? I know you said pay yourself 10%, but would you say someone should invest 10% of their first significant chunk of change from content creation to investing? Can you
So
answer that? I'm sorry, I
you
didn't
well
see.
you said that $1,000, and now you're saying significant chunk of change, right? Listen, $1,000 could be a significant chunk of change to somebody, right? If you're, if you've, what I mean? So it's all relative, right? It's all relative. What's old to you might be new to me, type of thing. So we won't, you know, so let's just think about it this way. Earlier we talked a little bit about you said making your first $1,000. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean do you mean the first thousand, or first amount of money you've made after you've paid yourself, after you've recovered the cost of investing in your high powered laptop, or your headphones, or your home office setup, or your high end microphone, or your lighting setup, right? So
Okay,
if
well, let me just say, because I haven't made any money from YouTube yet. So this question is inspired by like the desire and dream of like, once I finally start making money from this. And you even told me, you, when you get this $1,000, $3,000, whatever it is, it's going back into your business. You already spent thousands of dollars so far just to make this thing happen. But when someone first gets that YouTube check, there's just that feeling of like, ooh, I've made money now.
well,
And you're very
and
like,
You know what?
Go
And I
ahead.
would never want to burst that bubble, because it's validation for all the hard work that you've been putting in, right? It's certainly not going to make you rich, but it is to some degree or the other validating the work that you've put in to this point. With that said, you got to be realistic and understand the situation that you're in. You are a business. And so getting to, there's a term called like break even, right? If that thousand becomes another thousand and becomes another thousand, all of a sudden you've gotten back at least all of the money that you laid out in order to be here providing us this great content that you put out all the time.
So
You've
wait,
broken even.
are you saying that one should kind of let that money, the first initial money they're making from content creation, let it kind of pile up? Let's say for example, I've spent $10,000 on my equipment, on my office supplies, on the apps and different things like that that I use to create content. Let's say it was $10,000. Are you saying should I let 10,000 come in and like let it just kind of stack up? Or do I take a part and invest it back into the business? Like how should I look at it?
You have to be strategic in how you want to look at it. If your initial investment is sufficient the sufficient enough to allow you to continue to create content at a level and a quality that is what you want and that is consistent, then I don't think that there's anything wrong with recouping some of your initial outlay, right? But then again, you have to be strategic. You could get to a point where, okay, now I've made enough where I got that 10,000 back. And so the 10,000 in the first dollar, now you start to think about, well, I have been thinking about moving into a bigger space or doing this or doing that or doing the other thing. But
Hmm.
what you want to be able to sort of, and you and I have had this discussion offline before, sometimes it's okay to stop, take a deep breath, and then, or how sometimes you have a big meal, right? And you eat and you eat and you eat, and then, it's, oh, do you want dessert? Sometimes it's better to sit back, maybe loosen your belt a little bit and let it digest before you jump into the next thing, right? So any decisions that you wind up making, ultimately let them be strategic, but there's nothing wrong with getting to a point of break even, right? Because this sounds like it to be a very expensive undertaking, right? To be a content creator at a certain level, you have to invest heavily. And so if at a bare bones minimum you got to a point where you broke even on your initial outlay, that's pretty good. And you should feel real good about that. And then you can start thinking about, what do I do with that first, second, third dollar, and so on and so forth. Yes, I would say that it is a good idea to want to reinvest in your business, right? Before you go out and buy, I don't know, the fifth or sixth pair of sneakers, or these other things that don't necessarily help you create better content, right?
Yeah, I agree. But even though this is great advice, it is kind of like a reality check because, and I guess that's why I wanted to have this conversation. Like I started out this video saying, so many people talk about all the money you can make with content creation. It's already a long road in itself just to get to that first dollar, just to get to that first 1,000. But what I'm hearing is there's going to be even more patience involved because there's that recouping period of your content creation journey because it's something you had to put in some level of money up front. That like we said, that's different for everybody. Everyone's initial investment is different, but it, ultimately this just kind of feels like no fun. It
I
feels
mean,
like, well, I have to continue to wait even after I'm making money because all I'm doing is just putting money back that I already spent. And that doesn't seem very fun or glamorous, if you ask me.
well, then for you and other content creators, you got to decide Like, what is it that you want, right? Do you want to have fun? Do you want to be glamorous? Because guess what? Work, even when it's for yourself, is not always fun and not always glamorous. And I it'll get annoying to you sometimes, but I caution you when you say making money, right? Because are you really making money? Or are you just getting back to even? And so when you think about your peer group, right? Some people who are these content creators have had a certain amount of celebrity or whatever it is that they can leverage, and so they can hit the ground running. They're already going to have tens of thousands, if not millions, of followers, and so the dollars get to them a lot quicker than someone who's a no-name person who might be super talented, but it's just going to take them a little more time to get that traction. And so, success doesn't necessarily mean that you can go out next month and buy a yacht. Success might be, I'm I'm at a level where my content creation is paying all my helps allows me to pay all my bills and my responsibilities, take care of my responsibilities. That's a huge, huge win. That means that your craft has gotten you a point to where you're self-sustaining, right? And that is a platform then from which you can then go off and do even greater things. And so, depending on where you are and what your situation is, you have to kind of set up really realistic goals, and be able to knock those things down so it can kind of keep you going. You can't necessarily look at it these other people, right? You're not going to do the numbers that Kim Kardashian is doing, or she's the first person that popped into my head, but people like that. Or every athlete now is starting a podcast. Why? Because it's easy. People know them. There's brand name recognition, and the dollars are going to quickly follow them. Right? So you and other people like you who are starting out, who are newer, who are growing your audience, have to be real thoughtful and strategic about the path that you're going to wind up taking, so you can get to a point where you're successful. And your success, right, and the success of your platform should not necessarily be compared to the success of, LeBron James and JJ Redick's new podcast that they just started, right? It's two completely different things.
Mm. Yeah, and I think I recognize that I've had to reframe success for some different areas of content creation, but this conversation is making me understand what type of financial success do I want, or like what do I want to do with the financial success, because it's still going to be a long time before the money made from this YouTube thing can go to more of like allowing me to upgrade my lifestyle. Because even though I started this video saying a lot of us, a lot of content creators will fall victim to lifestyle creep, and it will um, eventually lead them to never be wealthy. But I can't deny that for myself and for a lot of content creators, we do this because we have a passion, but we also want to make enough money to upgrade or shift or make changes within our lifestyle. That doesn't always mean fancy trips and fancy clothes. Some people want to be able to retire their parents, um, help out their siblings, help out their family, do just other things, not always what they portray to us as this cool YouTuber lifestyle thing. But I will have to be reframing my success, because you just made the road seem even longer.
I,
Digital art with Canva. Oh, go ahead.
I'm not looking to make the road sound like it's longer. I'm just looking to help you and hopefully whoever is in your audience. Like, you have to, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever your goals and aspirations are, they need to be steeped in some level of reality, right? These things look great, right? A lot of people will say, "Oh, I want to be an influencer or this or that or the other," because they only see the absolute best case scenario. They only see the best music video of the influencer or content creator situation, they don't see the other things. They don't see the long hours and, of they don't see the long hours and the hard work that goes on behind the scenes, and with no traction, for could be months, could be years, maybe, right? And that's the thing, it's a marketing thing as well, right? Just like anything else, you people oftentimes only want to show you the best situation, right? And you don't always have a full picture of what it is that you're getting into. So I think for you, and I think for what you're trying to do with your audience, in terms of being authentic, in terms of being able to lay it all out there and be candid, yes, there is there is a scenario where things aren't going to happen overnight. You know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
is not, that's okay. That's something that people have to do. It takes work. Just because you're not working for a company and you're working for yourself, that means you actually probably need to work a lot harder, right, to get the things that you want out of your chosen profession.
So I um we talked about, like, your first 1,000 you made from content creation. I myself am a bit confused because we talked about, like, that recruit period. Like, you put money in, you want to put that money back. But when people have a traditional job or they receive a check from their 9 to 5, whatever it may look like, they do use that money to sustain whatever their current life is. They pay their rent, pay their bills, etc. So I don't know my exact question, but it's like, if you were to get $1,000, or for example, digital art with Canva says they're making about $300 a month with their content, should they be using that to sustain whatever it is currently? Should that go towards bills, or do they just put that money their essentially YouTube business is making to the side in order to recoup? Like, how do you decide what to do?
This goes back to an earlier part of the conversation where we talked about having a plan, having a strategy, and what it is that you're going to do. If that person, I don't, if that person is working in addition to doing the YouTube channel, right? If let's say that's the scenario, I have a 9 to 5, but I'm also doing this. And I'm doing this in the hopes of really getting this thing off the ground so that it becomes a situation that it can, free me from my 9 to 5 job at some point in time. Then that's what I'm doing. But if you're in a situation where you have other income and then you're starting to make income off of your YouTube, maybe you want to save that money. Maybe that is a situation that you're in where you can kind of reinvest as much of those dollars right back into your business to accelerate your exit from corporate America, if that's what it is that you're looking to do. But it has to be,
Mm,
again, steeped in reality. I don't know where in maybe it is possible, but I would imagine it's very difficult in the United States of America, to take care of all your responsibilities on $300 a month, right? And that, let's not forget, you still got to pay the taxes on that money, right?
mm,
So, everything you have to think about in terms of $300 might not really be $300. If you got to pay 33%, if you got to pay a third of that to, in taxes, that's really $200, right? And so then what do you do with that, right? So, these are the things that you want to think about and be thoughtful about. Everyone is going to have a different scenario or a different situation. But if you're in a situation where you have a main source of income, and this thing is something that you're doing on the side in the hopes that it becomes your primary source of income, save as much as you possibly can so that you can reinvest back into this business, and perhaps it accelerates your exit from your traditional job, if that's what you're looking to do.
so wow. So you're what I got from that is, you're supposed to, not supposed to, but one should consider any money they're making from content creation, whether it be $1 or $300 a month, to save that money and not be so pressed and so hyped to use that money to pay bills, or even in that current moment inflate their lifestyle. One could think, I make an extra 300 a month now. Now let me go get a new car and increase my car note. But that's how you find yourself not being wealthy in the long run. Marissa says, this sounds like net versus gross profit. Do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah, if you're yeah, that so right. Gross is that that sort of headline number. But then, you know, whatever.
Oh, she's pointing out the fact that you could be you can make, for example, $300 a month, but you had to spend whatever you have like I said, my subscriptions, my Adobe subscription, this StreamYard that I'm using right now, this costs $25 a month. So that 300, I guess, is not 300, or whatever
it,
you make is not really what you're making.
it's not, right? And because again, taxes come out, and then you have an infrastructure that needs to you need to support it. It isn't free, right? You at some point will need to upgrade all your equipment. You have, so you have fixed and variable costs, right? And so your fixed costs might be all of the different things that you have to pay for every month. Listen, you have to think, you got to get as granular as the electricity that you're using to power this conversation is a cost of yours. It's a cost of doing business, right? The headphones that
Yeah,
you
the
have are
Wi-Fi.
the headphones that you use are a tool. The microphone, the Wi-Fi, everything that you are doing is helping to support the infrastructure that you have in place, and you need to think about it. You need to get a pair of glasses that put dollar signs all over everything, so you can have a true appreciation, for what the situation is. That $300, maybe it's 200 after taxes, and then after you strip out everything associated with your content creation and supporting that channel, you could be at a deficit, right? You could be. It just depends on your situation, but the idea is to over time become more and more sort of efficient, so that eventually you're able to keep more of the money that you're bringing in.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Ty Fan Me says, what do you think is a good investment of your initial funds going towards building your YouTube channel? So we did definitely touch on this topic at first. I mean, already within this conversation. I'm trying to think, do I have anything that I want to add? What do you think is a good investment of your initial funds going towards building your YouTube channel? Just as a recap, what I've learned is you already invested in your YouTube channel. So any money that you begin to make, you're kind of just refilling the pot again. But definitely rewatch this live. It's available for replay, and you'll get a really good comprehensive answer to this question. Nicole asks, does the structure not matter? Example, business, self-employed. Um, I guess in terms of different tax rates for different structures.
So what I would say is always find and consult an accountant, right? To really give you a CPA, right? Ideally to give you real good specific advice and instruction on a tax situation. But generically speaking, you could have an LLC. You could in an LLC it's like a pass through business, and I think several years, there have been certain changes made to these structures with respect to taxation. And so, don't, you probably don't want to be taxed as an individual. You would rather be, you would rather your entity deal with that. But again, you confirm that with an actual accountant. But, your structure should be that of a business, not of a person, doing stuff.
Yes.
You
And
want to
so,
have a structure. You want to have an entity in place. through which
I
you
want
do
to,
business.
and that's exactly what I wanted to share. Like, Nala Wright is my YouTube channel, but everything that I purchase, um, everything that is a reoccurring cost on a month to month basis for me to do YouTube content creation, everything like that, that goes through an LLC that I have set up. So there are some people who, I think when you become part of the YouTube partner program, I'm not a part of it yet, so I don't know exactly, but they do ask for your tax information. And so you can either put your own yourself as an individual, that tax information, that tax ID, or if you set up an LLC, you would then put your EIN um, for that information. So I think if you don't have an LLC set up already and you do YouTube, in my opinion, it would be a good idea to do so, so that, like Gamal is saying, you're not, I don't know if, did you say you're not taxed as an individual?
It,
You don't deal with the implications of doing business just as yourself. An LLC gives you some type of coverage and it's a pass through entity. I think I've heard it be referred to as before. Do you have any advice for content creators in terms of the whole setting up an LLC? Is that something you advise as well?
I think, again, I'm not necessarily here to give advice, but I don't. How should I say this? It's probably a good idea to take a look into setting up a structure. There are a number of different structures out there, right? You could be a sole proprietor, you could be an LLC, you could be an S corp, right? You could be a corporation. Look into the structure that best suits your particular situation, right? From a business and from a tax, standpoint. What you want to what you want to try to do is to have a moat around you in terms of protection with respect to liabilities and different things like that, right? If worst case scenario, something happens and someone needs to come after somebody, you don't want them coming after you as an individual. You want them to go after the entity, right? Because that's the entity is it. And if the entity ceases to exist, your life moves on. So it is probably not the worst idea to look into setting up one of those types of structures, whether it's an LLC, an S corp, whatever winds up suiting your particular situation.
Yes.
Definitely.
And yeah, I would second that. So I do want to just kind of wrap up this conversation by making the point of, I just want to for us to break the cycle. If you are a newer content creator, you're kind of at the beginning of the journey. It doesn't even matter what stage, but my purpose with this conversation was to inspire or encourage creators to build sustainable wealth and ensure their success isn't just a facade, but a foundation for long-term financial security and freedom. I It's nice to have visuals of that lifestyle, of an aspirational lifestyle, but sometimes it can do more harm than good to us as creators. So, what would be your final kind of thoughts on this conversation, Gamal, and breaking the cycle and just the importance of financial education overall?
Yeah, I would just say, I think you put it very nicely yourself, actually. But I'm a big believer in financial literacy. And sometimes I'm a big believer in financial literacy. And for some reason, it winds up being a topic of discussion that makes people really, really uncomfortable, or they don't know about it, or they don't want to know about it, or it makes their head hurt. I've heard all kinds of different excuses and reasons, as to why people aren't a little more proactive about being financially literate, right? And that doesn't being a financially literate doesn't mean you're an expert on everything, right? No one's an expert on everything. Nobody. And but I think that at a bare bones minimum, you want to have a level of comfort, that you want to be comfortable and you want to be able to be in control of your particular situation. And not knowing and being ignorant about certain things, it has been the downfall of many, many people. I don't need to mention specific names, but pick an athlete, pick an entertainer, right? Pick one of these people that everyone thinks is, kind of so smart and successful, and we can probably find a handful that have been taken advantage of, right, to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars in certain situations, because they were really good at what it is that they did, but they did not. But they then sort of like allowed other people to kind of run their financial life, to their
Yeah.
own detriment. Right. Clearly, we're not necessarily talking about tens of millions of dollars, but that's what it can become. It's never too early to start learning, and it's never too late to start learning about all these different things. You don't necessarily want to wait until you're making lots of money to actually learn about money. So, as I said earlier, set up an infrastructure, put an infrastructure in place for where you want to be or where you think you're going to be, and then at least it's there when hopefully the fruits of your labor begin to work, begin to pay off. And guess what? It can be adjusted, it can be tweaked, it can be, you can change things around, right? You can expand it as it needs to, or you can shrink it if you need to shrink it. But saving and investing, I think, is a foundational skill, right? And these are some of the it's the backbone of this idea of it's very popular now, I think, to talk about this idea, this notion of generational wealth. That takes a long, long time to happen, literally generations, right? And so, but you have to start somewhere, and you may not achieve it, but maybe your offspring or maybe your grandchildren, will achieve it. But anyone, I would just say this: it takes time, it takes energy, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of education. It takes a lot of self-education. None of this stuff is a quick overnight thing. And I'm talking about whether you want to build a business, or whether you want to then take all the money that you're making and make all these great investments. It all requires additional learning, right? You have to dedicate yourself to being a lifelong learner, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, because guess what? Your role, what you're doing now, didn't exist, and in 10 years from now, right, there will be
Yeah.
all kinds of changes to this particular role, right? You'll be competing with AI, right? If I'm a person on TikTok, I'm really nervous about whether or not it will exist in this country, and if it does if the owners do, if ByteDance does have to divest of TikTok, what does that mean, right? And so,
For us as content creators,
right,
yeah.
especially if I've leveraged, if all my revenue, 100% of my revenue is coming from my activity on TikTok, and then potentially overnight it could go away. What do I do now? Right. And so, what's the takeaway if I'm one of those people? You got to diversify, right? So, to the extent that the skill set is specific and unique in terms of short form content versus longer form content, maybe I need to learn how to make some longer videos. So I'm not necessarily beholden to one platform or another, right? And so these are the things that you constantly have to be thinking about. It isn't boring. It isn't, it. These are things that are really, really important that you have to kind of take hold of and take charge of. It's fun to do the things that you like to do the things that you're passionate about. But in order to continue to do them, you must begin to think or have the mindset that I am a business, right? Like, I hate to say this, but when Jay-Z said, I'm a businessman, think of it that way. You are a business. And so everything that you do, you have to think in terms that latte that matcha that you might go outside and go get, tomorrow morning. If you're thinking about your business, if you're doing some business, or if you take the business phone call, that's a business expense. Write it off. All that equipment that you purchase,
Mhm.
write it off. Squeeze every cent of depreciation out of those assets that you've purchased, right? maximize everything that maximize everything that you're doing, and don't take any of these different things for granted. You must operate as a business. You have to think about it that way. And so being, ignorance of the law is no excuse, right? In some places. And so being ignorant about your finances is not something that people are going to have a lot of empathy and sympathy with you, for over a period of time. So don't put yourself in a situation to be taken advantage of. Don't necessarily listen to people who will tell you that everything can happen overnight. That's just not true, right? In most cases, it isn't true. There is nothing that I could tell you to go out and buy today that is going to make you a millionaire tomorrow necessarily, right? And that's not the type of relationship you want with anybody, right? You need a long-term relationship that allows you to become more intelligent and more able and more capable, right? If you're in a situation with somebody and you never get better, but they're only getting better, you have to rethink that situation. And so I'll stop there. I could probably go on all night about that type of thing, but I think you are thinking about these things the right way. And I think the first step is to be able to think about them, and then next you have to start being able to execute. As uncomfortable as it may be, to learn some of this stuff, you need to think about it, and then you have to actually start executing on some of these things that we've discussed.
Yeah, I think that was an amazing summary that you just kind of gave there, and just filled with a bunch of takeaways that we should have. I do have a question of, can Gamal come back soon and talk about LLC versus self-employment benefits financially? To that question, I will do my best to actually see if I can get my husband and I, our CPA, on a call or one of these live streams to go more into to detail about that. And in general, I think I learned from this conversation there's many areas that we can go into. Nicole put it kind of perfectly, quite technical convo, I guess, might need a serious series for this topic. And I wanted this conversation to be kind of a general umbrella. And in the future, we definitely can go deeper into investing and saving and putting it in the context of those of us on this content creation career path, or using YouTube to be a significant income stream for ourselves eventually at some point, that's no problem at all. And I think I second everything that was said. And ultimately, we need to prioritize financial education as content creators. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. So I think that's it for us, guys. If you need a financial advisor, if you're interested in starting a relationship with a financial advisor, I don't mind sharing Gamal's contact info at all. And maybe something can be done there. In general, you can do consultations with Gamal as well, just about your specific situations, whether that be wanting to pay down debt, take care of your taxes in terms of like a strategy to handle taxes and things like that. He's not a CPA. Your investment strategy, this is the person that you want to go to. Purchasing a home, um, your business plan strategy things, all of that Gamal has helped me and my husband with, and he's a perfect resource. So please reach out to me if you need that information. I don't mind giving it to you at all. Thank you so much, Gamal, for being on the call with us. And I think that's it, guys. Bye
All
bye.
right.
You got to wave to the people. Bye
Have
bye.
it this way, this way. Have a good evening. Thank you for having me, and I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yes.